Released in 1979, Regatta de Blanc is the second studio album by The Police. Their first record, Regatta de Blanc, introduced the band's style and great songs, with Roxanne taking off in the States, giving them their first real taste of success. While being lumped in with the new wave punk movement, they were never really anything to do with it stylistically. It was possibly their high energy and fairly sparse three-piece setup that led to this initial association. But their second album would dispel that completely, with their unique style developing further. Following the faux French title theme as their first record, Regatta de Blanc is supposedly very roughly translated as white people's reggae, although in French it doesn't really work, as reggae is still reggae. It seems it was a play on words, and a response to the criticism aimed at the band's alleged appropriation of the Jamaican genre, not just through rhythm, but also as far as the vocal accents. There didn't seem to be a problem coming from the reggae community though, with Bob Marley himself reportedly impressed with this new three-piece. For their first record, they recorded at the relatively modest Surrey Sound Studios, with studio founder and producer Nigel Gray. This lower budget option would have been quite normal for an unknown band, but now they were more established and show potential to be big. Their label, A&M, were keen for the band to seek out a bigger studio and top-name producer, which would have been easily covered by the profits of their first album. Not getting carried away though, the band chose the thrifty option once again and returned to Surrey Sound, with Nigel Gray once again as co-producer. The studio was equipped well enough for the job, and was centred around the MCI JH428B 28-channel console. Although it would have been normal to feel pressure coming up with material for a second album, there was a relaxed approach from the off, despite not having enough songs initially. Stewart said, "We just went into the studio and said, right, who's got the first song? We hadn't even rehearsed them before we went in." Whereas Regatta de Blanc had benefited from one of the most prolific songwriting periods of Sting's life, they were so short for new material on this album that they even considered re-recording Fallout at one point. To fill in the gaps, Sting and Stewart unearthed songs that they'd previously written and used elements of them to create new songs. Many of the lyrics to Bring On The Night were recycled from Sting's previous band's Last Exit song, Carrion Prince, and The Bed's Too Big Without You also began life as a Last Exit tune, while Does Everyone Stare originates from a piano piece Stewart wrote at college. The closing track, No Time This Time, was previously the B-side to So Lonely, and was added to pad out the album's running time. There were of course some great new songs written at the time as well. Message in a Bottle, easily one of the standout tracks on the album, was first aired to the public on the BBC show Rock Goes to College, where they played it live for the first time at Hatfield Polytechnic in February 1979.
This is a sort of baptism. Interesting. This is called I Hope That Someone Gets My Message in a Bottle.
The song would go on to top the charts, making it their first record to do so. The title track is an instrumental, except for a few words and vocal sounds by Sting, which developed from live performances of I Can't Stand Losing You, when they would do an extended jam in the middle of the song to fill time, as they didn't have many back at the beginning. So when they were looking for material, they turned this jam into its own song. Along with Death Wish, this is one of just two songs credited as written by all three members of the band, with Sting having sole songwriting credits on most Police songs. Regatta features the most songs penned by Stewart on a Police album, with 4 songs. 2 of these were intended for his solo project Clark Kent, but were used for this album instead. On Any Other Day and It's Alright For You, Stewart plays most of the instruments also, except the guitar solo on Any Other Day. Stewart was playing his Tama Imperial Star kit for the sessions, with the kick drum mic'd up with an AKG D12 and a Bayer M260N on the snare. The AKG 451 was used for the hi-hat, floor toms and overheads. Bayer M201s were used on the rack toms. Sting's bass guitars, with a 1978 Fender Precision fretless and an Ibanez MC 900DS fretless. He may have used a Kramer bass also that belonged to Surrey Sound, although there is no real confirmation on this. His bass was plugged into the Ampeg SVT head, which fed the SVT 810E cabinet. He picked up this set after touring the States the previous year, as before this, he'd used a Marshall setup. Apparently, the cab was mic'd up with a PZM mic, with a DI also taken. A Neumann U67 was used for the vocals.
Giant steps are what you take, walking on the moon.
Andy Summers' guitars included his cherry-coloured Hamer, Gibson Les Paul Custom, and 1956 Gibson Les Paul Jr. for the slide solo on It's Alright For You. His main guitar, though, was his 1963 Fender Telecaster Custom that he used on Message in a Bottle and Walking on the Moon. Sting wrote Walking on the Moon while he was lying drunk in a hotel room in Munich, Germany, following a TV appearance there. He had the bass line in mind and started walking around the room, which led to the song's original title, Walking Round the Room. The song is perhaps the most reggae influenced, and even by dub, as you can clearly hear the dub tape delay effect on Stewart's drums. Andy Summers' distinctive chord strum punctuates the song with a really cool flanger effect. Engineer Chris Gray said, "We had this thing called a scamp rack, and in particular, the S24 ADT. You get different ones that fit into the racks, echoes and flangers, and there was this one in particular that was sort of a phaser chorus flanger double tracking module. When those guitars come in on Walking on the Moon, that is purely the sound of the scamp rack. We use that one a lot. I happen to have one of these old units in my studio, so I tried to see if I can get a similar sound with it. Close enough, but I'm sure most flanger pedals could do the same." He had purchased his first Roland GS500 around this time, and used it on Walking on the Moon to create a warbling sound in the breakdown. It could also have been used on Message in a Bottle as well, to create an organ-style effect. He did have his Pete Cornish-made custom effects board also at the time, which featured many classic effects of the day, including the Mutron 3 envelope filter, Electro-Harmonix Phase Mistress, and MXR pedals such as the Analog Delay, Distortion Plus and Phase 90. Andy's amps included a Fender Twin Reverb, a Music Man 212 HD, and a 100-watt Marshall JMP Super Lead. Released in October 1979, the album was met with critical acclaim, as well as being a hit commercially, topping the charts and prompting their first world tour, where they packed out venues as far-flung as India, Egypt, Mexico and Taiwan. They were even outselling their contemporaries, with the album eclipsing the Clash's London Calling and the Jam's Setting Suns. Just a year later, with the release of their third album, they became one of the biggest bands in the world, and arguably one of the best three-piece bands of all time.